Sunday night, I'm so used to doing a podcast on Sunday nights that accuracy in media, nothing more important than that, and it's so hard to find. Let me just intro you here a little bit. So your accuracy in media, your mission is to expose corruption and hold public policy actors accountable through investigative journalism and activism. And I know that's true because I watched some of the videos that you put out and stuff. And, specifically what we want to talk about tonight is some of the DEI investigative work that you've been doing at colleges and universities, going in there. And because we have a Senate Bill 1, and I believe that was put out by Jerry Serino. I believe he was the architect of it. But Senate Bill 1 is supposed to stop, from what I thought, the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, classes, coursework, all that biasness, all that liberal wokeism, and put everything more on a natural plane. So let's see what else we have here. So I'll just add this: your conservative nonprofit media watchdog. You have a bunch of series of undercover investigations. Again, we're going to focus on the DEI. I know you've done other practices as well. And I know you're not from Ohio, but you've been in Ohio hitting the Ohio universities. So these institutions are evading Senate Bill 1. So I'm gonna swing it over to you. If there's anything you want to fill in with that intro and stuff, please feel free, and then we'll just try to go right into with what's happening at the colleges, if you don't mind.
Sure. As we said previously, we've been undercover in K through 12 school districts across Ohio. And in the past year and a half, we began investigating higher education within Ohio. And consistently, just like we found in K through 12 education, the law means nothing to the radicals who run higher education. Now, that said, part of it is due to the fact that the DEI ban in Ohio doesn't actually ban DEI in Ohio. It doesn't touch curriculum at all. It doesn't touch academics at all. It's not a Florida-style DEI ban meant to actually solve the problem. Instead, it supposedly bans DEI departments, DEI staff. Well, all those people just got new business cards. They just merely renamed the programs. They're keeping on business as usual. And of course, academics not even touched.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And we're going to show some of the video and stuff that you did by going into the colleges and universities so people could see firsthand exactly what you're talking about, and some of the administrators and that saying, what, Senate Bill 1? What the heck is that? We haven't changed anything. But so let me ask you a couple questions here, just to fill in the backhoe here with Ohio. So was there a particular reason, because you're not from Ohio, was there a particular reason why you decided to go and check out the colleges here in Ohio, which I'm glad you did, but I was just wondering what the motivation was. Was it Senate Bill 1 or something else?
Yeah, we investigate any state that has banned DEI in higher education. So we've been at universities in Ohio, Utah, Florida, North Carolina, all over the place, Alabama, any state that bans DEI, we have begun investigating to see whether or not they're complying with the law. And we find consistently, even the state that in some ways has the strongest DEI ban, Kansas, consistently the radicals who run higher education feel so unaccountable, so above the law, that it literally meant nothing to them other than, as I mentioned, getting new business cards, new job titles, new programs for some of them. These people are laughing at the fact that there's a DEI ban and continuing on with the exact same divisive radicalism.
All right, let me show a little bit of this video here, and this will get some discussion started going here.
Kent State University is yet another university where we have found out that the lunatics are in charge of the asylum. In this department, we had an individual who not only bragged about continuing DEI practices, but who had some very strong opinions about white men.
As an openly gay woman who is from Rhode Island, who's from New England, we already established the New England side of it. Coming here was a culture shock.
It's a culture shock. I gotta come in here for a second here. I mean, right off the bat, that's a red flag, right? So this director of education here at Kent State University openly gay woman, and this and that. That's a red flag right there.
Nobody
yes,
cares.
Miss Walton
That's what she's wearing on
I'm
her
Adam
sleeve.
Guillette, Accuracy in Media. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. We received a report that you were talking
Okay, now here's where you're confronting her. I'm going to play a little bit more. I got a little bit more of this I want to play, but here you are
about
confronting
how
her.
the DEI law in your university hasn't affected you at all, and how you're continuing to do the same things, essentially with different wording. Is that true?
I'm walking away from you.
One thing I could say about Kent State University and our TGI programs, and we're very connected at the state level, so I know all the stuff that's going on at the state level, was like they're all about diversity, equity, inclusion.
You told our investigator that it's all about keeping the white man in power and the white man wants to take over education. Is that true?
No.
Well, is this you in the video right here saying that?
No, that ain't true.
I will say this, it's not being forced through a Trumpian lens. It's taking away the buzzwords and having to be more careful of how you're talking about equity and inclusion and
why is it such a bad thing? It's great. Go ahead. I'm sorry. It's just so
ultimately it's just to keep white men in power.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
And if we dumb down education, then we can continue to do that. So that's what the ultimate goal is.
What are your thoughts on this?
Is anti-higher education, anti-public education. So that's what they're trying to accomplish.
They want to keep the white men. Something about white men in power. She doesn't like white men.
Ironically, she was saved by the white man. One of her colleagues came over and trespassed me, so I had to leave. It was a white guy, and it had to be a great moral conflict for her that moment.
Right. So just to set the record straight here for a minute on Senate Bill 1. So this is a bill enacted here in Ohio, and it applies to all public state institutions of higher education. And it enacts major reforms aimed at eliminating this DEI crap that's there, promoting intellectual diversity. So real intellectual diversity, not just, the one-sided wokeism. Institutional neutrality, increasing transparency. It also requires civic education. But it doesn't sound like it's getting through. That's what your reporting and everything is saying, right? It's just not really...
That's what they're saying to us. And I love to talk about intellectual diversity. I think at Kent State University, it was something like 91 or 94% of all political donations in the last election cycle went to Democrats. These people claim to love diversity of thought, not a priority of theirs at all. And it was bad enough for decades. We all bemoaned having to fund left-wing faculty. They're still there, don't worry. But now we have this massive class of administrators like this woman. They outnumber the faculty at some universities. They're nearly the same numbers as the students, and they're merely taxpayer-funded activists. You find them most commonly in the education schools, criminology, sociology. They are taxpayer-funded activists pushing things in defiance of state law. Now, the classes are doing things consistent with state law because the Ohio bill is so weak it doesn't affect academics. So they can keep promoting DEI in math class if they want to. And they can keep promoting it in programs as well because there's no legal consequences for breaking the law. And I know they're attempting to address that now, but they actually passed a law and attached no legal consequences to breaking it.
Yeah, Ohio Senate Bill 1, and I'm just going to read this here too because I looked it up as well. It does not impose fines. It does not impose penalties. It does not impose court-enforced sanctions on public universities and colleges for noncompliance. So the big question is, what the heck does it do? So it sounds like they changed the name of these offices or whatever. Instead of saying diversity, equity, inclusion, they might say multicultural, philanthropy or whatever the heck.
Belonging is the most common one.
What's the most common one?
Belonging. They rename it most frequently as belonging. They do that in K through 12 education as well. They call it the Department of Belonging, which is ironic because if you're a conservative, if you're an evangelical Christian, I'm not sure that they feel that you belong.
Yeah, that's a good point, because they don't want any of that religion or anything like that. They just want to, like you said, they are activists. They are paid activists. That's what they are, Jonathan. Paid activists on our taxpayer dollars, man.
and they're being paid on our dime. I want to introduce everybody to a term that I started a couple of years ago. I call it ABE. ABE stands for anything but education. We've been seeing it in K through 12 for many, many years. It's what's run Ohio K through 12 schools up to the point of 20, 30, sometimes over $40,000 per year per pupil just in K through 12 with these administrative staff. And Adam is exactly right. We have bloat in the administrative side, and it's a trickle-down failure. These people are pushing anything other than education. And what it's turned into is it's a social welfare system for people that can't otherwise find gainful employment in any other walk of life. They assume some sort of administrative title, they're given a business card, and they're told, go out there and convert kids. And here's the thing. These college campuses, and I know I'm going to switch back and forth because there was a time when we talked about this radicalism and we saw it on college campuses and thought, wow, that's really bad. We should avoid those colleges. Right now, it's almost impossible to avoid the colleges with the radicalism, and it's pushed down into K through 12. So assume until you find otherwise definitively that it's consistent from pre-K up through graduate school. This stuff is pervasive. It is cancer. It is invaded. These people are making tons of money on the backs of us taxpayers to radicalize children. And here's the thing that just drives me mad, and I'd love to give Adam's feedback on this. It used to be the case that college campuses were the marketplace of ideas, and what liberal education meant, a true liberal campus, meant that anybody of any position could espouse and talk about their positions, debate topics and subjects. That's virtually gone now. If you are not lockstep, if you deviate slightly, then the violence ensues. The cancel culture, the shouting, the name calling, the violent vitriol is all over college campuses. And now that's come down market. It's terrifying to see it in K through 12, but it exists there as well. I'm going to give one example, and this is one of many that I could give. It's called the N-word game. This has been found in K through 12 all over Ohio in various different school environments where a bunch of black kids will surround a white kid and harass and shout at him or her until they force them to say the N-word. And as soon as he does, then they start beating him up and punching the kid. This is the result of critical race theory that got rebranded as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then when we figured out that diversity, equity, and inclusion was just really rebranded critical race theory, they started morphing and rebranding it something else like JEDI, which stands for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. They're constantly renaming this stuff, and it is the same failure that is constant. It's just rebranded over and over again, repackaged, and they're not going to give up because these people are making tons of money off of this grift.
Yeah, I think they are.
Well, I take issue with one facet of that. They could easily be employed by the Democratic Socialists of America or any George Soros type organizations, and that's where they should be. If you want to be a far-left activist, go work for the DSA. Knock yourself out. I'm not opposed to that. If somebody with their private dollars wants to support you doing far-left activism, great. That should absolutely be allowed. It shouldn't happen with my tax dollars. It shouldn't happen with federal or state tax dollars. It shouldn't happen with the tuition of a kid who just wants to get an education degree or a social work degree or a criminology degree. We shouldn't be forced to fund their divisive radicalism.
That's a very valid point.
Yeah, very valid.
Yep, they're taking our tax dollars.
Now, the point here also is, in Ohio, we've had this Medicaid fraud that we're in the midst of. It's a big, big problem, but there was no oversight. And I see the same thing happening here with SB 1. There is no oversight. So there's nobody policing it. There's nobody saying, well, if they're not following the rules of SB 1, there right now is nothing that happens to them. And that's a big part of the problem. That's always going to be a part of the problem. I can't understand why you would put a law in if you're not going to enforce it. Now they are coming up with House Bill 698. I don't know if you heard about this or not, but 698 by Tom Young was introduced last month. And basically, it creates a formal enforcement mechanism for Senate Bill 1, which they don't have at the moment. So, but it's still in committee. It hasn't gotten out of committee. It's going to, there's going to be so much backlash against anything like that. Hey, let me ask you a question, Adam. Are some of these other states that you have visited, do they have any kind of a formal mechanism in there that imposes fines or penalties or anything like that?
Great question. Nearly all of the DEI bans are as worthless as the one in Ohio, so don't feel that bad. The Kansas ban is unique in that it has a reporting mechanism and legal consequences for breaking the law. And I'd like to find anybody who voted for SB 1 and ask them, why would you support a law but not support consequences for breaking it? Who here would be paying our taxes if there were no fines or penalties for not paying them? Who would follow the speed limit if you were never, ever, ever going to get a speeding ticket? It's outrageous to claim that you think something is a problem and a bill will solve it, but not support penalties for the paying the bill. Or for breaking the law. Or similarly, these university administrators who are saying, we don't want penalties. Well, that's them basically admitting to us, we don't want to follow the law. Because if you're in compliance with the law, you wouldn't give a darn if it was the death penalty for defying the law. But clearly these people know that they're going to continue breaking the law. They don't want to deal with consequences for it. Kansas has penalties. Florida, to a degree, has penalties. And Florida actually addresses academics. Florida prohibited universities from promoting identity politics. You can talk about controversial topics in a political class, a philosophy class, but you can't promote them, and you don't need to bring them up in math class. I think it's quite straightforward, but evidently not necessarily for many members of your legislature.
All right, let's watch
Adam,
this.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do we do with education schools? Because this stuff has infiltrated colleges that teach education. So we have teachers graduating with and then pursuing teaching certificates who have been indoctrinated in this stuff. And the wild, bewildering thing that I still can't get my head around after many, many years of evaluating and looking into these issues is the complete oblivious nature of teachers who don't seem to care about the academic results. Let's step back for a moment and look at the illiteracy rates in Ohio and the United States. Nationally, we're looking at about 30% literacy rate, which means about 70% of America is not proficient at reading. And it gets worse when you look at mathematics. When we have an entire crop of teachers who have come out of college, many of them with advanced degrees, and they have masters in education, who go into education either on the administrative side or as a teacher, who clearly, I think we can illustrate, don't pay any attention to the academic results and are there solely to influence the sexuality, the identity politics, and the divisiveness on campuses to try and create activists. Oh, wait, I have to say that again with my fist in the air. Create activists, because that apparently in their mind is their job. What do we do to get people, to get a fresh crop of people who are capable of actually teaching academics into the academic system?
Well, I often say, and I truly believe, and I've been in more K through 12 school districts than probably nearly anybody on the planet, in the country. But I think traditional K through 12 education, as we know it, is perhaps in states like Ohio irredeemable. This comes after meeting with administrator after administrator, superintendents, DEI staffers, and having them brag to me about how they deceive parents, break the law, defy the law, trick parents. They brag to me about this, and I've done this across the state of Ohio. There was Matthew Boas, the equity officer in Upper Arlington outside Columbus, who was getting paid $250,000 annually as an equity officer. You know, everybody's saying, oh, these teachers are underpaid. Fire that guy. $250,000 annually. Imagine how much money that could quickly be spread out amongst hardworking teachers. But that speaks to the priorities of K through 12 education. They know that the results are laughable, and they don't judge their success based on the same results that you and I do. K through 12 education in America today does not exist to educate children. By all objective measures, they fail at that task. They have more money than ever, and the results are the worst they've ever been. What are the tasks they succeed at? Well, every 2 weeks without fail, the teachers get paid. They never mess that up, not once. Every paycheck without fail, a portion is taken and given to the union. That doesn't get messed up. They don't mess that up. And every election without fail, every 2 years, 99.999% of that goes to far left candidates. This is not a system designed to educate children. It's a system designed to funnel money from taxpayers to far left candidates, enriching big fat cat unions all along the way. That's the only task they do well. So it is, I think, naive and ridiculous and silly to pretend that they exist to do anything else.
Yeah. Well, with the results that we're getting with the kids and everything like that, I agree with you 100%. It can't be that they are trying to educate the kids because the reading levels, the math levels, everything is just plummeted. There was a graph I was looking at too, and it shows the public education enrollment, and it's constantly going down. More and more parents using their heads and saying, you know, we're going to get our kids the heck out of these public schools, which I totally recommend. But then you were looking at the cost per pupil, and it just keeps going this way. I mean, the cost to educate this is just so skyrocketing high. And here's the other thing, too. I'm sick and tired of hearing about how underpaid the teachers are. The teachers have an income that is far above the median income here in Ohio, okay? And it's our tax dollars. So it's people paying them, people making less money than them, paying them out of our taxes and everything. So I don't want to hear, because that's all I hear, and it's propaganda from the union. That's one of their selling points there, to pass these ridiculous levies that never end.
But Joe, that happens in part because of all the money that gets defrayed and spent on other causes and objectives. And again, that goes back to my expression, Abe, anything but education. If you can reroute much of the money into administrative staff, into consultants, into third party, into the constant parade of construction and reconstruction and rebuilding and revamping and new lighting and new surfacing of it's the construction is mind-bogglingly endless in Ohio and elsewhere. All of that money, that the hundreds of millions of dollars that's constantly flowing into anything other than children's education, is an outlet for the money to evaporate and disappear, which then gives unions and local school districts the excuse to point to the shallow coffers and say, well, we wish we could pay you more, teachers, but we need more money. We need to go out for a levy because, look, we don't have very much money. We're going to have to cut busing if we don't pass the levy, and we're going to have to cut extracurriculars, and parents are going to have to pay for their kids to join the sports and buy their own instruments. Meanwhile, the money is being diverted. It's grift. It's being diverted into other things, which
it's a broken, corrupt system. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah. And there are great teachers who I think are underpaid. And that's on purpose, because if every teacher was paid appropriately, even the hardworking ones, it would be incredibly difficult for them to come back and ask for another tax increase. If they said, listen, all these teachers are getting paid $80K, $100K, $120K, but our equity officer is only getting compensated $250,000 annually, and we really think he should be up to $300,000 annually. Imagine how the taxpayers would respond to such a thing. So they will always purposely, like many local governments, keep potholes in your road, do a poor job in the things you want most, threaten to turn the lights off in your kids' sports fields, because otherwise they can't come back to you and say, we need to raise taxes for the nonsense that you don't really want anyway.
Yeah, well, we're starting to catch on to all that, and one of the things we're doing here in Ohio is we're trying to abolish property taxes here in Ohio. So we have a signature, and we're trying to get that on the November ballot, make it a constitutional amendment, something like similar to what they're doing in Florida. All right, how much of a budget burden do these DEI programs put on the Ohio taxpayer? What savings would be recuperated if these were eliminated?
Great
the
question.
DEI, are there specific DEI programs, or is it just kind of embedded through all the programs? What is it?
Both. There are DEI departments at these universities. They were banned. They just renamed their jobs, renamed their positions, renamed their programs. If you want a real get-rich-quick scheme, get in the business card business. Because everywhere I go, these administrators bragged about simply changing their job titles. Now, to figure out the exact cost would be quite difficult because it really requires figuring out exactly who's still doing DEI. And we're a small nonprofit organization. We can't investigate every college at every university and every department. And this is why I thought most states had an attorney general, to ensure that there was legal compliance and figure out how much fraud was occurring within the state from people in departments that shouldn't be existing anymore. So it's hard to put a finger on it. But what we do know is that administrative bloat at universities across America is out of control. They outnumber the faculty now, and they are dramatically driving up the cost not only for taxpayers, but for students who have to pay the tuition.
Yeah, I tell you what, Adam, I'll go to you in a second, Jonathan, but I just want to follow up on one thing there with the Attorney General, because our Attorney General just flew the coop. Dave Yost, he's out of here. He resigned. And I think a lot of it has to do with this Medicaid fraud that's been going on. He's like, I don't want to get involved with it. I'm going to go somewhere else. But the Attorney General did not look very hard into the fraud. I don't know if the governor was preventing it. They say the governor was preventing it. Same thing with the auditor. He didn't look very hard. But they said the governor was preventing it. DeWine, that's our governor here. But if you're relying on the Attorney General and you think that he's going to police SB 1, I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. I mean, when you can't even, all the Somalian fraud and Medicaid and everything that is so obvious here in Ohio, and they can't find it, and they keep saying, we're doing a good job. They're not going to police SB 1. This is what's so maddening. So it's a good bill. But if there's not anybody there to enforce it, it's not a good bill. There's no teeth
to it. So I want to highlight something for our conversation. This may be something, I'm not sure if Adam's aware of this. I'd like to get your feedback. A good friend of ours who's been on this show with us as my guest, Linda Harvey, worked on an expose tracking union dollars, teachers union funding of Ohio legislature. And it's on both sides of the aisle. We have money flowing, as you pointed out, to the Democrat Party, but there's also money flowing from the teachers unions in Ohio into Republican pockets. So many of our key supposed Republican, I'm going to air quote that, being the founder of Ohio Rhino Hunters, we have money, unfortunately, that's paying off Ohio Republicans as well. That makes them also willing to turn a blind eye to this nonsense on campuses. So where I think a lot of people in Ohio might like to look at the supermajority that we have, I suggest looking at many of the people who occupy supposed Republican positions as not actually Republican, and many of them are bought off by the very teachers unions who we would like to fight against to reclaim education in Ohio. Is that something that you've looked into as well?
We see that consistently in red states. In red states like Ohio or Texas, the biggest obstacle to school choice in K through 12 education is not the Democrats because they don't have the votes. It's generally rural Republicans. And that's where the teachers unions then spend their money. They're sitting there saying, we would love to back the Democrats. They have no chance of winning. So we've got to find the Republicans whose interests are aligned with us. And that's because in many of the rural districts, the biggest employer in the representative or Senate district is K through 12 education. Now, is the goal of K through 12 education to create jobs for your state house district? I thought it was to educate kids. Because if it was just a job creation program, fine, let's hire those people, have them dig holes, hire more, fill them in. At least then they wouldn't be getting indoctrinated for 13 years before they went off to Kent State University and got to deal with that wacko radical. But unfortunately, that's the case in many of these red states. The rural Republicans stand against school choice because education is their big employer and the teachers unions back them. That's why when you look at the math and see that nationally teachers unions 99.999% with the bar over the 9 goes to Democrats, it's because like the 1/100th goes to those rural Republicans. And for those who are curious how much money that is, the teachers unions are the biggest donors in all of American politics. They donate more money than George Soros, more money than Charles Koch, and it's our money.
It is our money. Let me play this. Here's another clip from when you were out and about. Let's watch this here.
There's no limitations in terms of what we teach. We teach as we always have. We place students in diverse population.
And the curriculum is still thorough. It's still thorough.
Same thing.
Many people think Ohio eradicated DEI from universities. That's false. These divisive principles are embedded and protected through accreditation.
There's no limitations in terms of what we teach.
Okay.
So Senate Bill 1, which is, I think, the bill that you're talking about, and kind
I don't
of
know
how
what it's called.
That's what we call it.
Okay.
SB 1. So the good news, if there is any good news that came out of that, was it doesn't impact our curriculum. So we are teaching our curriculum, our courses, as we always have. We are teaching social. We talk about bias. We talk about social justice. I mean, we can talk about anything in a class as long as our learning objectives on the syllabus are clearly saying we have many courses that are on sexual diversity.
Okay.
We're still teaching them. We're teaching them as we always have. Limitation on curriculum.
Okay.
What Senate Bill 1 did do was there was a dismantling by our president and our board of trustees of various student support entities on campus. So our Office of Diversity and Inclusion was shut down, for instance.
All right, so diversity and inclusion was shut down, but a lot of times they're just changing the name. It's really not.
I wonder how many people lost jobs over that. I'm guessing 0.
And
she even said, you're probably right. Adam, was that also from Kent State?
I think that one was from Ohio State, which responded to us when we released our first investigation and asked for the raw footage from the video. And when we have honest brokers, we're usually happy to share it with them. So I said, we'd be happy to share it. Could we have a 5 or 10 minute interview with the provost or the president of the university at the date of time of their choosing to discuss this? And they gave me the runaround, and I followed up with them after the Department of Justice launched their own investigation into Ohio State University. And they said, well, you held our video hostage, and we really would have liked to have included it in the response to the DOJ. And I said, not to worry, we'll send it to them directly. Have a nice day. Haven't heard back from them yet, so who knows?
Yeah,
maybe any day they'll respond.
If memory serves, it was an orientation meeting that took place at Kent State University with a room full of high school juniors and seniors and parents, packed room, where the person leading the group mentioned how proud they are of their furries activity, that they have a furries program, and chucklingly said, we're very pleased to point out that goes late into the night often. That's
anything but education.
What?
Anything but education.
Anything but education. Absolutely. Yeah, let's focus on furries instead of telling all these parents. And the mystifying thing is that most of the parents, actually everybody in the room, just sort of sat there. I assume many who actually were paying attention and heard the actual words that were used were just stunned into silence. But in what world do we live where you're thinking about sending your kid to a school for whatever in the heck Kent State University charges now, and wondering, I don't really care if they leave mathematically skilled or competent in English or whatever, but I just really want their furries activities to be late night and really fun, so that they can dress up and cosplay in sexual garb and pretend to be animals. What even is happening there? I think that was Kent State.
What's happening is we've become the liberal ones. We're the ones saying you want to be gay and be in this department. We don't care. This shouldn't have anything to do with education at all. You want to dress up in your stupid garb and with your friends, whatever. We don't care. That's fine. but don't spend our tax dollars on it. Don't force us to sign off into your radicalized nonsense in order for an education. You know, it boggles my mind the amount of money they spend on like the LGBTQ departments and whatnot. Do they have any studies showing us that the gay students learn differently from the straight students? I wouldn't think so. If people want to have their own recreational organization, sure, knock yourself out. You want to create a gay student group? Great, I don't care. But I can't understand how they could think that that's a priority of ensuring that every student on that campus gets the best education. To take my money and to give it to somebody with one of these random groups that's entirely unrelated to learning, you know, one of the hard sciences or math or liberal arts.
Yeah, something that you can actually make a living with, or engineering, yes, or something like that. Yeah, this is just, right, it's warping the mind. It's making the mind into mush. It's got to be cut, and it's you're bringing it to the attention of us, and parents got to know what's going on. When you go in there, all right. So let me backtrack here for a minute. So give me the procedure here. So you take a hidden camera. Obviously, you're not going in there with a camera, and they're telling you all this. You have a hidden camera on you, correct? And you are filming all of this.
Yes.
And obviously. So is there any backlash to that? Does anybody ever say, oh, you can't do that, you can't film us, it's against the law, or anything like that?
Well, we not only act within the law, we stay pretty far from even getting close to the line. You know, 38 states allow hidden camera recording with one person's consent, meaning I can record you as long as I'm there to consent. I can't leave a camera behind and record somebody. That's like wiretapping. You're not allowed to do that. 12 states only allow recording when both parties consent. And not coincidentally, they're nearly all the far left, blue, corrupt states. California, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Illinois. Sadly, my home state of Florida is a relic of that and is a two-party consent state. And some are stricter than normal, some are kind of milder than normal.
One second here, Adam, just to clarify that. So if it's a two-party consent, how can there be a hidden camera?
You can only record in a two-party consent state, depending on the state law, if there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. So we've released some investigations from Florida because our law is a little bit more lax. As long as we're in an open area where people could overhear us, a coffee shop, you can record. If you go into a private office, you'd be breaking the law. But in Ohio and in the vast majority of states, one-party consent.
One-party consent. Okay. Now, when you also approach them after the fact, is that difficult
Awkward
to do for an investigative reporter? Is that difficult for you to come up, or is that just the fun part of it? Like,
no,
hey,
I mean, none of it's fun. It's work. You know, I used to primarily do our investigative work, and now we learned that, as silly as it sounds, our videos get far more views when I go back and confront these people. And we don't care about views. That's not how we measure impact. But far more views means the Assistant Attorney General of the United States responds on Twitter. It means the governor of the state responds on Twitter. Elon Musk responded to one of our videos on Twitter last year. And it dramatically increases the chance that we can get actual legislative impact. You know, we started doing these confrontations in North Carolina. And every time we would release an investigation, the university administrator would get fired. The dean of students at UNC Asheville got fired. We would go and confront these people. They would get fired. Doing it, however, is like being inside a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. It's incredibly awkward, but it's necessary. And I think anytime we can put a frown on their face, we should have a smile on ours.
No, I think it's got to be tough. Yeah, I'm sure it's tough, and confronting them and all that, because you don't know how it's going to go. But that is the best part of the video, when you confront them and you say, like, I just said this, and you're saying you didn't say it. Oh, you know, all these liberals are just like, oh my God, you know, I'm being exposed for all this. Have you had any luck? Like, have you given the videos to anybody here in Ohio, attorney generals, to Serino, anybody? Has anybody seen the videos, like you've presented to them in any way?
Sure. We correspond with many state reps, many state senators, many attorneys general, a couple education commissioners across the country, including some in Ohio. We're a nonpartisan organization. We don't support or oppose candidates or legislation, but anybody who has the ideas that align with ours, we're more than happy to coordinate with them. So we're consistently more than happy to work with any elected official we could find. You know, a lot of our K through 12 stuff in Ohio and in Indiana, actually, we had school board members who said and hit us up and said, I've been fighting with the rest of my school board saying this was happening, and they told me I was full of it. Will you send me the videos so I could show them? And in those instances, anytime it's an honest broker, we're always happy to share the raw footage and work with anybody.
One other question. Wouldn't it be easier to just put a plant, not a plant, but a student plant, a student? Couldn't you just get yourself a student and they would, with their cell phone, actually record when they were going off on a tangent with DEI and stuff like that?
We use a variety of ruses to capture content in a variety of circumstances. And, you know, also, we've got a limited amount of time. You know, when we're hitting school districts, we try to hit, 8 to 12 in a day if we can. When we're hitting universities, we want to hit multiple people at every college before we move on to the next university.
Wow.
So we are not, deeply embedded for months on end. And that's something I always wonder. We captured these conversations meeting somebody out of the blue. We just walked in off the street. We chat with them for 2 minutes and they're bragging to us oftentimes about breaking the law. To your point, what would we learn if we sat in their classes or worked in their administrative office for 6 months? What kind of things might come out then?
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Now, let me send over to Jonathan. You have any last thoughts or something? Maybe a last question or something? I know we could talk forever
actually,
on this,
it occurred to me to wonder about our local rep here in Northeast Ohio, State Representative Sarah Fowler Arthur, who came from the State Board of Education. She has an education background. She's been a guest on this program, very, very solid on education. I'm wondering if you've had contact or know of her.
No, we'd always love an intro. If you want to send me an email or anything afterwards, we'd always love an intro for a like-minded ally. And we also set up action alerts on aim.org, our website, aim.org, where you could send a message directly to the trustees of each of these universities. We use their private email addresses, although we don't share those publicly, because I think many of these trustees are asleep at the wheel.
Gotcha.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, all right, Adam. So for my own curiosity here with accuracy in media, so can you just tell me a little bit about it? Because I'm in this podcasting stuff and all that kind of thing, and I find it fascinating what you're doing. So can you just dive into that just a little bit? Like you were saying, you were going to multiple colleges, universities, boom, boom, boom. Do you bring how many people travel with you? And, just a little bit of that kind of information real quick, if you would. I'm just kind of fascinated about it.
Yeah, we have an incredibly talented team of hidden camera investigators, as I said, that use a variety of ruses to make friends with people. We've gotten a number of tips from trustees of universities in the past year since we started these investigations. And based on their tips, they've kind of told us other places to look for things and where we might find other content, which is very, very helpful. So our investigators use totally different ruses all the time, and we have a fairly large team of investigators. So it's kind of enabled us to go back to these universities multiple times. If we capture something one time, we can go back oftentimes and get even more. Because what happens whenever we release an investigation is the university always says, oh, that's one bad apple. And in states like Texas, Florida, North Carolina, they fire them. Oh, that's one bad apple. And then we go back and show them again and again and again that it is a rotten orchard. Just like in K through 12 education, it's not just the one administrator that we meet. These are broken systems that require radical reform.
That is awesome, and I want to keep in contact with you too. So if you're anything else or anytime you can come on the show or anything, please let me know. And we want to have you on again. Absolutely, Jonathan. I'll give you the last word here tonight, and we'll probably wrap it up.
Yeah, no, really, my last word is thank you for coming on the show. This was a great teaser. There's a lot more to it. I get the sense that you and I are definitely cut from the same cloth and have many similar experiences. I'd love to share those in greater detail for our Ohio audience. Typically, our big night is Sunday evenings. I'll leave it to Joe to work it out with you, whether or not you might be available. But if we can do a longer segment focused on this, we want to give the Ohio citizens, American citizens, the information needed to scout this stuff out, find it, and work toward rooting it out. And first and foremost, before that even happens, there's great news to share on the public education exit that has been happening. It's happening in droves all over Ohio. Public enrollment, I don't even call them public schools anymore. They're government-run, welfare-based education system. The families are leaving, they're departing in mass numbers, and the results are spectacular. So I'd love to have you back on the show so we can get into greater detail on the good news as well.
Yeah. I'd be delighted. You name the Sunday, I'm there.
Okay, Adam, thanks. Hey, I really appreciate you coming on. I do mean 100%. I'm not just saying this. I do want to have you on again, and I do want to stay in contact with your group, okay? Because you're doing great work, and it's interesting. We need to hear what you're up to. All right, have a good night. Thanks again, everybody. Take care. God bless.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Thank you for having me.